So I'm the small guy. Like Ellen said, we have about 1,400 members. So there we go. And we have a diverse membership. We originally started as mostly microbiologists, but when you think about biocontainment, biosafety, biosecurity, there's a whole bunch of people that are involved with that. And that is part of our growth, and a lot of our growth too is internationally. Biosafety, biosecurity is becoming, everyone's becoming much more aware, especially with Ebola outbreaks, bioterrorism, the bird flu, Asian, all that. We have 6 team members. One thing I highlighted here too is heavily engaged and productive volunteer members. So when I started with them back in 1993, they just came. They were managed by members, and I worked for an association management firm, and so it was really it was a challenge because we were the business people. We knew associations, having worked with them for a long time. So having to get them to trust us and trust our expertise took a long time, and it's still we're still working on that, but it's come to a really good place. I feel like that we really work as a team. But it's also a strength of our organization because we do have heavily engaged organization. We work with different consultants, and they're all, from interviews and surveys, they were just amazed at how involved and how much our members were engaged, with the organization, how much they sold it, how much they liked it. So it really is a strength. And so that's kind of a thing, someone's talking about selling, a strategic plan or change to your membership. That was a big part of our transformation. This is kind of I started in 2006, and we had rapid growth from 2001 to 2008. I mean, we almost, doubled in revenues and membership and our conference and everything. And there's a lot of environmental factors that affected that, bioterrorism, bird flu, Ebola, awareness, more regulations for research labs. So I think in 2007, I was at a conference. It was like one of our best conferences. Revenues were through the roof, attendance was through the roof. Everyone's patting each other on the back. A cocktail party, whatever. So the next morning I woke up with a little headache, and I thought, oh shit, what if this, goes down? What I need to do something. And I kind of knew we had to change things because it was kind of growth. Was mainly for our conference, and our conference is 60% at that time, probably 70% of our revenues. So that was a big problem. If our conference revenues go down, we're kind of screwed. And we had a strategic plan in 2004, and things were going pretty good after that. But once you get that board cycled off, everyone kind of forgets it and they want to go in a direction. So we had to revisit in 2006, which kind of went okay. But in 2007, I thought we really need to redo the plan and get people engaged. So we did that, and everything sounded great, and everyone was happy. But then, about a year later, you kind of look at it, and there was too many goals. There was too much in the plan. It was like going all over the place. The same with our council; they were going all over the place too. And there was really no follow-up with the volunteers, the volunteer leadership on the strategic plan or any training. We started having, presidents come in and just, we were going one direction and they wanted to go the other direction. So I kind of met with, my senior staff and then also some of the incoming board members to talk about this and really look at how could we continue, not only strategic plan, but strategic thinking throughout the organization. Not just the staff, but the members, because they are very involved, they're very engaged. So we came up with a plan, and a lot of people probably already have done this. And so we met with a different strategic planning consultant. The other one was good, but he was good, in the 80s and 90s, not the 2000s. So we met with someone new, and we did a lot of interviewing, we did a lot of research, we tried to see what other organizations were doing. And so, like I said, we had to sell this to the leadership, the president at the time. It's like, oh, I don't need any strategic plan training. We do that at my school, we do management training. So, and one of the things we did, first things we did even before we hired a strategic planner, we went to the ASE CEO Symposium. And so it was me and my president-elect, the president at the time. She had management training, so she didn't go. But it turned out to be a great experience for the president-elect. And for me, it was, it's a good meeting, a good thing to do. And she sold it. She sold it to our council. She sold that, and then there's two other components of the plan that I put in place is not only to do that every year, but also to work with, develop a new strategic plan, but not just have a strategic planner there, but come back and visit with us. Not only to visit with the board to help us, move on with the strategic plan, but also to train our volunteer leadership. Like I said, we've engaged volunteers to kind of sell them on it, to ask questions. So every year at a conference, we do a workshop, a half-day workshop with all our volunteer leaders. So that's been very helpful. And also helpful too, because a lot of those people will become, we have a council, not a board, will become council members at some time. So that's been very helpful. And the biggest thing, before the transformation is, like I said, we had tremendous growth, but it was kind of chaotic. We didn't really budget well. We didn't price things. Some things we just gave out for free that we should, that had costs involved in it. So we had to start charging for some things. Like we used to have a free job board. We charge for it, not that much, but I mean, some people, it's $500 for 3 months to post a job. I think we're $150. But just simple little things like that we just started doing. And then, like I said, training engagement was a big part of it. Getting everyone involved and a buy-in, especially when we have a new board. Last year we had a very new board, so it was really important that we had more sessions. I started bringing my executive committee right after our conference to our office to have just 2 days, no agenda, just talk about the association. And one thing that came out of that is what we've been doing is looking at our committee structure. And the committee is not doing anything, or we'll just get rid of it. Form another one if we need one. But really, we're trying to downsize. We have like 29 committees. Like 5 or 6 task forces. We have a task force crazy president right now. So we're trying to downsize that, and we try to meet every year to do that. The budgeting was a big thing, and a really big thing in the last couple of years is strategic partnerships. Doing a lot of partnerships with government agencies, USDA, CDC, either conferences or training. We've actually trained CDC employees last year, and then there's a select agent program. And what they want is us to develop a forum so that they can get feedback from the users of that select agent program back to the CDC. So that's been very successful. So the results, we increased our programs and members. I think our biggest program that has been very successful and very helpful to the bottom line is our distance learning. Back when the recession, probably from like 2009 to 2012, it was hard for people to travel, to get training. So that's one thing we really put into place, and it's grown. I think even this year, doubling from last year. We had 5, probably 4 years ago. Now we have 20 webinars a year, plus we have like online, webinars. Not the webinars, the recordings, the self-study programs. So overall, our growth is up. Membership, distant learning opportunities, and conference attendance. We've had record years of revenues and reserves. I think this year we're finally going to break 2 million, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's big for the little guys. We have increased opportunities with partners, and we have more new programs on the horizon. Driven by membership, and David talked a little about this. He's kind of more mission. What I like to do is like have our board really focus on our mission and our strategic plan, so they stay focused, but more our staff kind of be more listening to members, making sure that we know what's going on in the environment, making sure that we stay relevant to them. I think that's very important. Sometimes if you have a board member, instruct them to do that, their friend will tell them, oh, this program sucks, you should get rid of it, and that goes. And we did just recently change our name from American Biological Safety Association to ACCESSE International. That's been talked about for years, and we finally did it because in the U.S., CDC, NIH, USDA, they come to us if they have questions about biosafety, and we work with them. But in the globals, WHO, UN, all those, they would see American and didn't realize that we had an international membership. So we always had to sell that or prove that we did have this membership. So that's been very helpful. And we're still U.S. focused, but we're too small really to have offices all over the world. But we have affiliates all over the world that we try to work with to get the word out. And like I said, we have engaged members, so our members are our best salespeople. That's been very helpful. So it's taken a while, I think to get where we are, but I think things just keep looking good, better and better, just with the engaged members. But I think the key thing really is the focus, keeping your board or your council or whatever focused, your staff. There's still work to do, but it's been exciting. So, thanks.
One of the questions, I was going to respond to one of the questions that sort of picks up on some themes here, but go ahead.
All right, first I'll ask if there are questions out amongst the audience members. So, and I think my job will mostly be running back and forth with the microphone.
I think this is directed to Scott.
Okay.
So you mentioned in your last slide improved engagement of volunteers, of staff. How did you measure that improved engagement?
Yes, I have to respond in there, so it's recorded. The easy answer is it's mostly anecdotal. People have smiles on their face now, but there are a lot of engagement tools out there. I'm not and scoring methodology. We're exploring that. I'm not exactly sure that I believe in all of it. What we are looking at through our HR office, who wants it is really doing employee surveying about levels of satisfaction, and then boards as well. We haven't implemented that yet though, and will. And that I would probably hang my hat on more.
I'll get back to you at some point.
Her question I got an answer to. The one that was asked in the beginning. George.
Question about your governance. Have you considered, or are you considering any type of improvement or reform to your governance structure? Because I don't think anybody talked about that at all. Downsizing your board, getting rid of your exec committee, any of those.
Let me use that to kind of bridge those two questions.
I know what I'll say will seem like an anathema. You got to get the right board. And so many of us feel it's not my job. Part of the I talk about the size, we have to change the dialogue within our community. Never allow your board or any of your members or any of your staff to put staff not in the member's shoes. Well, this is the members are going to do this. Particularly as the CEOs, executive directors, whatever it is, you cannot allow them to see you as an outsider. So you need to change your language, frame it so that you are one of them as much as they are one of them. It's not always so easy, I recognize it, but you need to change the dialogue, and so that's part of the answer. How do you get them to talk about these things? You need to own the legacy of your organization. Doesn't matter if it happened before you or if there's some existential thing that happened. You're in the chair today, or you're responsible, so you got to own it. You got to bring it to them. Part of that is our governance legacy. So it's not always so easy in different places, but through proactive and kind of underneath, I was able to get my board from 28 down to 12. I was able to raise the level of person. The board moved from a representational board to a competency board. The criticism has been it's an elitist board, okay, and I get that part. But you also have to choose and influence carefully. You probably got a little more industry focused than academic focused. Most of my board are CTOs and above, major Boeings, Fords. What I wanted was organizational leadership. People who could help organize and lead. Our organizations, whether they're 2 million or 150 million, they're complex. We've got 8 product lines. It's more complex than most companies. So you need good leadership around you. So by getting to a smaller board, you can get them to focus. If you can move away from representationalism, you can actually focus on the mission and what's the outcome rather than representing X, Y, and Z. And you can get there. We've taken a recent step of actually eliminating all the other committees. So I asked the board to answer 4 questions. What's the governance we need to lead our organization in the future? How do we get stakeholder input into our programs, products, and services? How do we actively engage the volunteer workforce in what we do? And how do we provide a unique value proposition for those that choose to be members? And I said, you cannot answer that by telling me it's a committee. That's our old model, right? Form a committee, get people involved, they tell you what to do, and then you go off and do it. There are much more meaningful ways to get people involved. And so you gotta get the right board and eventually get there. And it's probably a smaller board, doesn't have to be, but if you look at the vector of most societies, it's going that way. There's a few that have gone the other way. And then specifically to your question, how do you get them to talk about it? You have to be very intentional, extraordinarily respectful, but intentional about it. And that's where you've got to be on the inside. You can't be an outside. You are all collectively in this together. I'm with you, you're with me. And you have to be brutally honest with them. And that's not always so easy because they hold the keys to your paycheck. So there's that respect that you've got to build up. Obviously you can do it smartly and stupidly. Start with your chairman, build it out, find those advocates. But you have to call them when they're not following their own things. Our predecessors are riddled by going too far, too fast, right? A lot of us have seen people that happens. So you've got to be smart. Every organization is a little different, but you can't be put to the outside, and you can't let a bad conversation go unchallenged. We have to own it because they are there for a temporary time. They're a parachute. They drop in. They have passion, but do they necessarily know how to run an event? Do they necessarily know how to run a complex information business? No. They don't want me to design their powertrain or the airplane wing either. We're the association executives. We understand how to run associations. That's an important competency to have in the room. They don't necessarily have that. So that's the part that you have to build. Part of your brand, part of your credibility is, I get it, but help me understand what we've got to do from this side. It takes time, but you can get there. So I don't know if it's a complete answer, but you have to be bold to go into it, do so respectfully, and you've got to have a lot of tenacity. Last comment I'll just add on that is the change that we're all in is whitewater change. It's not episodic. You're not going to make one push, okay, we change the board, it's time. It's episodic. It's every day you're going to have to push. The culture change, it's a contact sport. It's everything, everybody. So that's just
I'll build on that. Pick up on that. Thank you. That was an excellent response and overview. I had a couple of years in the HR world, and so I also think that the human resource aspect of building the board interaction is equally as important. The first board meeting I was at, we had an open night, and I noticed that different groups were forming and going out and eating, and others were left out. It was like high school, And I actually put a stop to that and said, we'll even if we have to spend more money and we pay, we're all eating as a group. It's really important to have everybody with one another and building that camaraderie. The other issue is that I have a monthly meeting with our executive committee, and that's the president, past president, president-elect. And one of the strategies of mine is that not only to inform them, but I don't want some rogue president emerging out of nowhere one year and saying we will change everything overnight. So if you've got 3 of them operating as a unit, it's less likely to happen.
So we do kind of the same thing, and that does help, especially this year. We have our executive committee, president, past president, we meet, talk weekly and discuss issues, which has been really helpful. For the outgoing president has experience, the new president has support, and then the president-elect, could learn the ropes so they just don't go in cold. As far as structure and governance, we're always kind of trying to evolve or change with the times. We don't do too much, but a couple of years ago we moved some of our committees around. Like I said, we got rid of some committees. So we're always looking at that. If someone, a staff member, a board member says, "Hey, why do we need this?" We'll look at it and change it. I mean, I think that's one thing you need to do is Dave was talking about before, the competition. A lot of competition is, from the corporate world. They don't have to go to committee and research things and do this and that. And that's one thing I've always, since I stepped in as executive director, we need to move quicker. We can't, we need to respond. We need to make sure that we're relevant and moving forward. So yeah, that's something we always look at is the structure. If it needs to be changed, we'll do it. You have to.
Other questions? Okay, I'm gonna hit you guys with one. School of Hard Knocks, we've all been there. It happens. You wanna maybe share one of your challenges that you've dealt with? I always look for the worst case scenario, what really went downhill fast and what did you do to recover as you were going through some transformational activities, looking at what you do?
I'll start. I'm actually in the middle of one right now, so I don't know what the outcome is. But so I had worked a lot of years at an organization that was international. About 10 years ago, we said, well, we're not really that international because we have mostly U.S. members on the board. And then over the last 10 years, it was international. So walking in my new job, having that kind of a mindset and working with Canada, I just assumed that all members were equal. And apparently I was learning that they're not, and there's years of past history and bad blood among our members who live in Canada and the ones in the United States. So what I am learning is that you should not walk in always with perceptions of where you've come from. You've got to really understand the climate, culture, who you're working with, and maybe I should have asked more questions at the start, like, do you normally hug and hold hands? Because they don't, but I'm working through it. Anyone else that's hard knocks?
I think kind of early on as an executive director, I probably could have stepped in more when it came to some, business decisions, marketing, budgeting. But I fixed that and also I have my staff, making sure that they can step in if they're, someone's trying to go beyond their budget or create, new expenses or programs that are just goofy, because that happens. So yeah, I think that's one thing. Being, maybe beginning is a little passive about that, but now we try to stay on top of that. Yeah.
Question over there too.
I'll give one from a staff perspective, manager perspective, and the other one from a governance. In my former organization, we were working on a merger and acquisition of 2 not-for-profits. It's really not an acquisition, it's sort of bringing the 2 together.
And what I did is I underestimated the power of one. There was one board member that just fundamentally didn't agree with this. And you know, we all have boards, all their board members, you kind of figure out who's got more credibility and less credibility. This guy was on the bottom end of that totem pole, yet he was persistent. Despite having 25 CEO letters saying to both boards, we're tired of supporting both organizations, it's time to become one, I assumed that the logic and the data would prevail. But this person was persistent, and the two organizations are not one. Both of them are doing well, but don't underestimate the power of one. From a management side, it was at SAE, you had about the right team, getting the right team. It's not always so easy to make a big change. You get addicted to mediocrity. Well, if I get rid of that person, I probably won't have X, Y, and Z. And so you continue to put up with not what you really, really need. And at a certain point, I kept on, kind of carping about this. And I finally said, you know what, it's me. I gotta make that change. I've gotta do it. And it's not easy, but once you do it, it's really good. So.
Thanks. So I want to connect a few of the dots there. The need for growth, you clearly define that. You talk about mergers and acquisitions, but that probably wasn't the driver. It seemed to be framed by that was the way to achieve the mission. And how did the conversation come to the board? And was this just the next or the clearest path to that objective, or was it a tough decision to bring? I'm kind of facing a similar situation. I'm just wondering how you teed it up.
Just give a little backdrop too. We all have reserves, right? Financial reserves, and you probably have an 8% target. And I said to my finance committee, why are you investing in IBM, Ford, fill in the blank, instead of your own management team? If I can't deliver 8% growth for you, it should stay in the markets. Give that money to me to invest. So, well, how are you going to do that? And I said, well, I need to expand the value proposition of the organization. We can do that organically, and we can do it inorganically. So that's where I committed to that 10% growth per year as a performance measure, and roughly half of it would be by renewal, extension of what we're doing, and then also expanding the value proposition to new domains. And the acquisitions were really going after new leadership, new products, new services, new markets, new customers. There's a whole pecking order we go down. I had to guard very much against the acquisition becoming the objective. One year they said, well, we want to have three acquisitions. I said, are you crazy? That's not the way you go about it. So keep it framed as a strategy. It's a tool to get to that place. And I'm very fortunate that the first two acquisitions we made, which is, it's tough for an organization to go down that path, have turned out to be everything we predicted them to be, and then some. So as you do that, you turn the crank, it gets easier and easier and easier. We know our sweet spot. We know they're $1 to $10 million. We know the markets that we're going after. I've got a rule set that I'm not a turnaround expert. I'm going to buy an ongoing concern that has a positive net contribution year over year over year. They have to have financial growth. So we screen a lot of stuff out because I can't afford a mistake, don't want a mistake. And every single one has been positive. There was only one acquisition that we made that we actually had to divest part of it. It was a little bit too far outside our mission and scope. But I use acquisitions also to challenge our mission. Sometimes I get people saying, well, he's trying to change the mission. I said, no, actually our mission is evolving with us. So we've expanded medical device quite effectively into the nuclear power industry, quite effectively through some of the acquisitions that we've done. It's not SAE, but it's another one of the organizations. It's a auditor authentication business. We bought an outfit out of Australia, and between our own startup and the Australia, we have 98% of the market. So that's you can argue the strategic positioning behind it. The acquisitions, if you get a board that's comfortable with it, goes down the path. I know that's not so easy with some boards.
Here's one. Bless you.
Thanks for the insight so far. So I have one question that you might want to answer in either of two ways. I mean, thinking about the title of the session, Alternative Organizational Models, how does your model look different than it was maybe 5 years ago? And or how do you think it will look different in 5 years in terms of the model?
So ours really just committees, getting rid of committees and adding some. In 5 years, I hope we have no committees and just and I heard another organization does this. Every year, they'll wipe out all the committees and then they'll go through what do we need and put together. Maybe they'll call them working groups or task force or whatever, and just have them do their task and then be done with. So I would hope we'd move to that in probably 5-10 years.
You always ask great questions. So when I started where I am now a year ago, it was healthy financially. Members were growing, and the board wanted some new life and energy. And as I started probing, it was a little sleepy. It was the old school nonprofit world. People showed up at work, did their work, and went home. And as I mentioned, as I was speaking earlier, I'm really making an effort in infusing entrepreneurship and thinking as creatively as possible. And our speaker this morning spoke a lot about excellence, and I'm demanding excellence. No one else ever had. As you raised, mediocrity does not work in this culture anymore if you want to move ahead. So part of our strategic plan is being the voice of public works and infrastructure in the world ultimately. Also adding value to those people who work in public works and infrastructure, and then offering excellence in education. And we're good in most of those areas, not great. So in these next 5 years, I want us to be great.
Internally, from a staff operations perspective, I think we'll increasingly matrix structure, where you have the competencies of events or professional development, matrix with true understandings of the markets. What's necessary for aerospace is not necessarily what's good for automotive. And then on top of that, you also have issues, for example, cybersecurity, right? It's not just an events activity, it's not just a standards activity. So we'll have cross-functional leads that will own those spaces. So it'll be increasingly matrixed within the organization. At a corporate, legal, or governance structure, on one level, increasingly becomes simple, singular boards with singular responsibilities, but it'll be increasingly a web of dedicated competencies to lead the organization that it needs to lead, and not focusing on what another organization should be doing. So whether it be joint ventures, whether it be acquisitions where you keep a not-for-profit or a for-profit board overseeing those activities, it'll be matrix or laced together that way. So sadly, more complex, but I think more effective.
I guess along those lines, I'll hit you in a second with your question, but I guess I'd like to ask from the audience here, how many of you are looking at the need, I assume because you're in here, for alternative organizational models, but your organizations will not welcome this because of the change? How many groups have stodgy, nonprofit boards, volunteers, members that just aren't going to be willing to change, or it's going to be a challenge to get your groups to actually move in a new direction? Fantastic. Because I'm standing up here, sitting up here, thinking about all of this and thinking about, okay, what is the value proposition of our members, the volunteers? David, you've taken your group and they've gone with you to a position of being so nimble, in my mind comparatively, focusing on the business activity and being able to function much more competitively like a business. And I think for the majority of us, we're not there yet. And that's the part that I'm really trying to determine, okay, how do we take this back? And it is having an understanding of culture and knowing how far to push, how quickly to push your group. Because you can push fast and you leave everybody else behind and all of a sudden you're out there hanging off the branch. And your future is certainly in question at that point because you're not bringing everybody with you. So that's the whole conversation as well. So that was an earlier question. Just an observation, thinking about all of this and trying to put my own head around what I need to be doing.
So, David, you mentioned rehiring your leadership team, not from the association space. So, for someone who's growing up in the association space, and I realize this is probably completely off topic, but we're in Q&A now, so what education do those of us that are coming up through the association space, what do we need to be doing so that when you're reframing your leadership team and pulling in from the outside, that we're not off,
Right.
not in consideration?
It's a great question. You can even bring that down as well. I've been in our organization 20 years. Do I not have a chance anymore in the organization? Right? Same idea. To me, it's actually the diversity of it. I don't hire all of my people from the outside, but I do know that we had too many people from the association community. And we're in Pittsburgh, okay? So this is not a commentary on Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh is not on the critical path of the association experience, okay? It just isn't. And this sounds mean-spirited, and I don't mean it this way. We have a lot of high school graduates who learned everything they knew from the high school graduates who hired them, who learned everything from the high school graduates who hired them, and the only place they ever worked was at SA International. So there was so much insularity. So when there's no competition, all you have to do is what you did last year and make the new member happy. It was very simple, but things are very different in 2008. So I needed to have a different mindset, a different experience base. And so I wanted to make sure as we moved into a competitive world that I was bringing people in from the commercial, where competition was just a part of the DNA. So it was really that I was trying to bring in, that mindset, that approach. I'm also a big advocate for hiring somebody who has had the same experiences and the same progressive within their profession. They've been promoted once or twice within their own organization, but they've also been in 2 or 3 different organizations, whether it be associations, whether it be in a for-profit world. I really want to have that diverse experience, so the people I'm bringing in bring all of those experiences to bear on our organization. So it's really not anti-association, not at all. My HR person, she started there as a high school intern. She was really good. She went back, got her bachelor's degree, got her master's degree in HR. She was fantastic. She'd been there for 38 years. She was only 51 years old. I said to her, the best thing you can do for me is go work for another organization and then come back. Because I needed that diversity, that bond. So that's the part I think, and what's going to be interesting for us to manage is, millennials, right? They want to have 17 jobs. That's the current number. They're not going to have enough experience anywhere. But how do you manage that? We may go too far the other way. But that diversity of experience is the critical part. So I was fortunate with the American Chemical Society, because I had about 8 different positions within that organization. So I got a lot of exposure to different aspects of the organization. So I was fortunate in one organization to have many experiences. So move around, get as much experience as you can. And if you can get on a place where competition is really important and you think that's an important part of your blind spot, go out and get that somehow, some way. I know a lot of the blind spots is what we've been talking about, governance, how do you deal with them. That's the biggest risk I face right now. my CMO, if he was here, he'd admit it. He's redesigned the website, and it had no place for the foundation contributions. And okay, all of us have that, right? That's a critical part. I said that would have been a death knell. He admitted, he says, that's a society blind spot I didn't know. So that's the part that we all have to work on.
So I think we probably could all agree as executive directors, one of our biggest challenges is finding qualified staff, but then secondly, affording them. And as we strive to expect excellence from our staff, it's very difficult to increase that budget significantly with our boards for staff. At least it's been my experience that that's the one they're very, kind of critical on. We want to be very incremental, 3% here. And, I'm a small budget, very similar to Ed in size. And our insurance costs are going up, our retirement costs are going up. The Chicago market, we're at 0% unemployment for jobs that require a college degree. Their pay rate for an admin assistant has gone up $8 an hour in the last year. So it's just incredibly difficult to not only find skilled people, but keep them, and then expect them to reach excellence. And so I would welcome any suggestions or thoughts on how some of you may have tackled that, because it is currently my biggest challenge in my organization.
Great challenge, and you kind of hit many dimensions of it. Couple of comments. Again, you're going to think I'm an anti-association person. I'm not. I've been in this world for 25 years. I'm just my profession, and that's what I am. One of the challenges I think we face in the association side is we want to be rewarded for the process. But I did it 3 times. One of the things you get with a commercial space is its performance for output. And so this goes to the leadership question. I've been able to go out and hire employed staff, put at-risk pay. They haven't paid their way. That doesn't necessarily work on the administrative side. That's another challenge. I get that part. But you hire the right people in leadership positions who can help transform the culture. They will pay for themselves if you hire the right people. And that's been working for me. I don't envy the 0% unemployment. That's tough. That really is. And how do you compete? Because you have to keep going. But that's hire the right people that are performance oriented, not process oriented. One of my earlier management positions was government relations. Oh, but I went to the Hill 17 times. I met with this committee. Did the bill pass? No. Well, then we didn't accomplish all those activities. Didn't make a difference. And that's kind of the mindset you have to get people to shift out of. So you crossed the road 3 times. Great.
And
Did you get down the road?
I came in and the performance reviews
Yeah.
were attendance, professionalism.
Yeah.
And so I took the job description of the staff and I wrote new performance reviews based off the job descriptions. And my legacy Sacred Cow staff person quit that day. So it was saving me a problem, but now all that institutional knowledge is also gone. But I was curious if, did you deal with any major kind of pushback? I have to be transparent. I was in education program management for APWA for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
So, and I advocated for equipment at the snow conference 16 years ago.
Wow.
I'll speak to
There's
you
some
afterwards.
transparency there. But
There we
I'm
go.
just curious,
No, absolutely,
Sacred
and
cows in the
Right.
staff.
right, and I know we have to wrap up. A couple of comments. I'll answer what you're asking in a minute, and what you asked earlier I'll answer now. So I've challenged my leadership team when they came right when I started. They knew strike now. They wanted more staff, and I said, okay, maybe, but why? And can you reorganize? Can you change your current business processes? And when I challenged them, we did not hire additional staff. And when they changed the processes, in some instances, those people in those roles did not have the appropriate skills anymore, and they left. And then we were able to use that money to bring in people who had the skills that we now needed, right? As far as sacred cows, plenty of them, but I have a great HR director. And one of the other important issues, really important, is when I started it was very siloed, as you may have experienced when you work there. And I knew that would not work. They were having a every week directors meeting. And I said, first of all, we'll have it every other week, but it's no longer the directors meeting, it's the leadership team meeting, because I wanted them owning our direction rather than each director advocating for his or her own program. I don't know if I answered what you're asking.
Yeah.
And we'll speak later because I want to hear everything about your experience there.
Yeah, I hear you saying we just hired our 6th person. It took me 6 months to hire
Yes.
a customer service rep. And I used 2 firms.
4 months to get an executive assistant, and I used 2 firms.
I ended up going with someone's friend, and it worked out great, so we got lucky. We've been pretty fortunate. I've had one person there, since 1994, another since 2001, and then I think the 2 others have been there 6 years or 7 years now. So, and I try to do my best to try to make the work experience for them good, try to empower them to make decisions and do things and take leadership. If they want to do a course or learn something new, I'm always open to that. But yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, even with my staff, they're all great, but there's still drama. And I'm not the best at dealing with that, but you gotta try to do your best to make their experience good. Whether it's a good, safe workplace, but also learning and empower them to challenge them, try new things. So.
Okay, so it's noon, so let's thank our speakers. We also have some parting gifts for them.